Hello and welcome. Happy Open Education Week. It's great to see some familiar faces here from previous sessions. So just before we get started, I'm going to do a few housekeeping items. First, I'm going to check that I'm recording. And it is. That's awesome. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that my sessions tend to run a little bit short of the hour, whether that be half an hour or 45 minutes. So there's lots of space for questions at the end. Just admitting some folks through the lobby. Welcome, welcome. Yes, and the other thing I wanted to mention was that this session will be recorded. So if you have to leave early, no problem. And the chat is always open. So if there's any audio issues, anything like that, just let me know and we can fix that. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. As I mentioned, it is Open Education Week, and this week the University Library is presenting a series on open education topics. Yesterday's was a beginner's guide to OER, so really the starters, basics, the foundation that you need to know to delve into the world of OER. Today, we're going to go a bit further. We're going to talk about delivering OER. So this is how to use open educational resources in your courses. On Friday, we'll be doing an info session on the OER Publishing Support Program, which I will talk about for a little bit today. So first things first, introduce myself. I'm Dan Cocroft. I'm the OER librarian here at the library. I currently live on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples. So that includes Comox First Nation, Sonawas First Nation, and the Qualcomm First Nation. As for AU, we have employees all over Canada, and we cover many different traditional territories. So here's our session map. So we're going to start with a quick introduction to OER. So for some folks, this is going to be some repeat information from yesterday. So sorry, Jonathan. And then we're going to talk about copyright and licensing and intellectual property. So these are really important to help us build that foundation when we talk further about delivery to see what's legally possible. Then I'm going to talk about publishing OER with the OER Publishing Support Program, and there'll be time for questions afterwards. So, what is OER? Well, these three letters stand for Open Educational Resources. If we use the definition by UNESCO, open educational resources are teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, that reside in the public domain or have been released under an open license that permits no cost access, use, adaptation, and redistribution by others with no or limited restrictions. I'd like to really highlight that word adaptation in here. That's key to how we define OER, the ability to make changes to those resources and update them the way we like them. So if you're not sure if something counts as OER, we'll talk about the license afterwards and how you can interpret that. But you can also use the 5 R's of OER to kind of get a gauge. An OER will allow you to retain copies, revise it, so modify it like we mentioned, remix it, so taking different portions of different OER and mixing them together, reuse the content, and redistribute or share the content. There are many, many advantages to using OER. I will stress that they're not always the best solution in every situation, but it's really good to know why you might want to consider using them. The biggest advantage to using OER is obviously cost savings. As free resources, it saves institutions money, not only if they are subsidizing the cost of those resources to students, but all the time and effort spent replacing textbooks that have expiring rights, all that kind of thing. There's cost savings to students too. This is the biggest advantage for other institutions, including our own. And that's that you don't have to pay those, like, for this $400 math textbook, something like that. The student can put their money somewhere else, which is really, really important to me. They're free to modify too, so you could make changes as you please. You can make your own copy, and maybe you want to localize it to use examples from BC or Alberta. Maybe you want to translate it to English. Maybe it's in a different language. Maybe someone else wants to take your work and do the same thing. All that is possible. We also have a easy to understand licensing system called Creative Commons. So I'm going to jump into that a bit later. Another one of my favorite advantages of OER is that they're accessible anywhere at any time. So a student can grab a copy before their course starts. They can keep that copy for the rest of their lives. They can access that anywhere. They can take it with them on a USB stick. They can change it to different formats, whatever they like. So it's really advantageous in that way. I mentioned just a few moments ago about how we think of OER as the ability to modify. It's really important to differentiate the difference between OER and open access. So while OER can be in many different formats, you can think of OER as images and videos and interactive objects. Typically, when we talk about OER, we're talking about textbooks. Open access is kind of the same way. So you could license a video as open access, for example. But when we talk about open access content, we're usually talking about research. So the key difference between these two is that the license of OER allows you to modify the work. OER is about creating and sharing free, adaptable resources to support teaching and learning. Open access is similar. It's about making scholarly research freely available to anyone without barriers. But we can see there the need to modify is different when we're talking about research. It's also an important distinction to be made between free and open resources. So if you find something, say through Google, that you can read for free, you can download it. It may be freely available, but it may not be open. So we need to ask ourselves a few questions before we go ahead and integrate that into our courses. Is it openly licensed? If not, you may not have permission to use it. It may be on a third-party website. If it's maybe on the publisher's website, maybe you need permission to, just gonna let some folks in here. Where was I? Yes, is it openly licensed? Yes. So if you have content, maybe you found it online on a publisher's website, well, you might have permission to send students to that link, but you may not have permission to download it as a PDF. So we need to look at the terms and conditions and see what license is actually there. Maybe something does have an open license on it. We need to make sure that we understand the rights granted to you by that license before you use it. And if you're ever not sure, just send it my way and I'll be happy to help you out. So we're going to talk a bit about licensing. So we're all familiar with this C logo here, the copyright symbol. So whenever you create a work in Canada, you're automatically assigned protection by the Canadian Copyright Act. We use this phrase, all rights reserved, because you're keeping all the rights provided to you by copyright law. Typically, if you want others to be able to use your work, they'll have to ask you permission. They'll say, can I use it in this specific way? And then you let them or give them permission. Open licensing kind of streamlines that whole process. So instead of hundreds of individuals asking you the same questions, you can specify ahead of time how you want your work to be used. They'll use a Creative Commons license. I kind of think about that as some rights reserved. You get to choose which rights you're giving adapters or adopters. If we map that to a licensing spectrum, we can see on the left hand here in red is all rights reserved. The author is keeping all the rights that they were granted by the Canadian Copyright Act. In the middle, we have some rights reserved, saying, yes, you may use my work in this specific way. And then on the far right, we have public domain. So this is content that you can use in any way you please. Once something is in the public domain, there are no restrictions on use. You don't even have to attribute it. You can just use it freely. Things will enter the public domain once they're given a CC0 license. You can specify that, say if you create a logo, like these logos, for example, and you want others to be able to use them, you can give it a CC0 license. You don't have to credit it, you don't have to do anything like that. The other way things enter the public domain is 70 years after the author's death. So we're seeing some really interesting titles come up recently, like the original Winnie the Pooh is now in the public domain. I think George, James Bond, the original James Bond, is coming in 2027. It's coming soon. All kinds of interesting literature. I believe the Mickey Mouse version, where I think it's Willie the Steamboat, something like that. He is also now in the public domain. So let's talk about some of those rights that you can reserve or give away. So all Creative Commons licenses, I should mention, you get to build these licenses. You get to choose which license you apply to your work if you're the author, if you're the copyright holder. So all Creative Commons licenses must include attribution, which is BY. So that just means that you need to make sure you credit the original author whenever you use this work. You can also apply different other elements to your license to make sure that you control how others use them. For example, you could specify that you don't want your work used in a commercial setting. So you don't want people to make money off of your labor. You don't want others to change the license. You can apply a share alike, that's SA. Typically, when something is released in a Commons license, you could make it more restrictive if you adapt it. So let's say I take an image and I Photoshop it, and I want to re-release it under a new license. Let's say it's under a CC BY. I could make it CC BY NC. So I don't want people to make money off of my version, right? If, however, the license was CC BY SA, I could take the image and I could make changes to it, but I have to release it under that CC BY SA license. So I couldn't add more restrictions like the non-commercial. You can also add a no derivatives clause on your license. So this means the work cannot be altered or be mixed. So this is where we draw the line between open access and OER. You'll find that open access content also uses Creative Commons licenses, but they'll have that ND in there to specify that people can't make changes. Really, this is a question of instructional content, which you might want to change, versus informative content like research, which you wouldn't want to change because you don't have the same data. Today I'm going to dive a little deeper into intellectual property as well, because that matters when it comes to delivering OER. The first tip, obviously, is to ask for help. These things can get complicated and they are changing often. At Athabasca University, we have a intellectual property policy. So it distinguishes between institutional IP, which is intellectual property owned by the university, and independent IP, which is owned by the creator. So really, it's based on the use of university resources and the nature of the work. So if you are creating in the course of your duties at work, and you're doing it for a specific purpose, it might have a different ownership. There are distinctions drawn between administrative and operational activities. Those are university owned, so whatever creative outputs come from that. Teaching and learning responsibilities, those often are OER. If you're writing a resource during your work hours, it's for a course, that's actually going to be university-owned content. Academic research activities is a shared responsibility. It gets a little complicated when we talk about if the research is funded by the university, that kind of thing. If you're doing external research activities outside of your role at AU, you own that content. So this is all important to consider because any works you create for a course belongs to AU. Only copyright holders can license a work. So you can't create original OER without university approval. So this might be a little daunting for some, but there are a few ways you can get around this. First, you could adapt an existing openly licensed resource. So let's say you find a textbook that's almost perfect for your needs. You want to modify it, eliminate some chapters, and add some chapters of your own. Great. Since it's already under a open license, you can't make it closed content, so it must remain under an open license. However, all your contributions still belong to AU, and that's really a copyright complexity that we still have to navigate. There's lots of intricacies there in terms of how that's navigated. You can actually include copyrighted material in an OER as long as you are clearly letting that be delineated. So you're saying this part has this license, the rest has this other license. Again, if you have any questions about that, we can cover that in a bit more detail. There are charts and graphs on how to combine different licenses together and copyright material, so it gets a little complicated. The other way you could pursue an open license for your work that you create during your teaching and learning responsibilities is to apply for the OER Publishing Support Program. So I'm going to talk about that a bit later in this presentation, but it is a way for you to receive comprehensive publishing support as well as get an open license for your work. Let's talk about best practices for delivering OER. The big thing is linking versus embedding. Yes, there are some great OER websites like OpenStax that let you download modules and put those modules directly into your LMS. Some of that can be problematic. So if you want to do that, it will increase course production workload. Unfortunately, because something is in a course in those modules, it means course production has to go over every sentence, and they have to edit that, which is a huge process when we're talking about textbooks. So that can really affect your timelines. It also decreases your ability to publish the OER later. So let's say you wanted to take it to the OER Publishing Support Program. unless you haven't made any changes to it once it's in the LMS, it's going to be difficult to get it out because someone's going to have to go into each module and pull it all out. They're going to have to remove all references to things that should be in the course, like exams, course-specific markers, like page numbers, that and readings, that type of thing. Because we really want to publish resources that are course agnostic. They're able to be used by others. If you have your OER embedded into the LMS, you're also increasing copywriting complexities. So, like I mentioned before, you're using open content in a closed space, and it is content that is openly licensed. However, any changes you make and additional stuff regarding the course belongs to the university. That's all tied together in a really strong web that someone has to tease apart. So that's extra work down the line. The other thing that I like to mention is that we want people to reuse your work. If you are adapting or adopting an OER, you want anybody to be able to access it, to take it and download it and make changes for themselves. So when you have open content in a closed space like a LMS, it kind of defeats that purpose, which is unfortunate. So stable and static copies. I've used this image here. It's a grip from a climbing wall, I believe. It looks kind of like a green nose, but it's supposed to be stability, right? So we are licensed to allow you to make your own copies. When you're providing students with openly licensed content, you really want to make sure you're not linking out to a resource that might be changed in the future. So we want to make sure that students in the same revision have the same learning experience. So you're not changing it. For example, if you are linking students to a OER from OpenStax, it's a huge OER publisher. That's great. They can access their OER. However, OpenStax makes errata lists every year. So they compile lists of corrections from students and instructors and apply those. So they're constantly updating the resources, which is super great. However, that means that students early on in your revision are having to deal with those errors, and students at the end of your revision won't. They don't have the same learning experience, which is not quite fair. Another thing is guaranteed future access. So while a big publisher like OpenStax aren't going to take down their OER, smaller OER certainly have that risk involved. They could disappear. Maybe folks can't afford hosting, something like that. Right. So we really encourage people to host a copy in a stable location. So this might be in your LMS as a link to a file to download, or it could be in the DRR, or it could be on their hard drive. You can encourage students to download their own copies. So currency. It's also important to select the most recent version of OER. So you might find maybe you really like the older edition of something a bit better. Ideally, you really want the most recent copy available, not only because those errors are fixed, but maybe there's content. Maybe there is world events that have happened that have changed what's being instructed. Worst case, we can also identify what you really like about an old edition and apply those changes to the new edition. Maybe it's the structure of how those concepts are explored. Try to seek out published errata lists as well. So OpenStax makes those really easy to find. Others have them in strange places. So if you can't find them, just contact me and I'll see if I can find any errata lists for you. If you're delivering OER long term, try and do regular reviews just to see if there's new editions available. So sometimes this might be the publisher. Like I mentioned, OpenStax will release a new edition every now and then. Sometimes it might be someone who's adopted the work. Adapted the work. They may take the first edition of, let's say, an American OER, and they've created a second Canadian edition. They've changed all the examples to Canadian context. They've updated all the information and fixed any errors, that type of thing. So I try to keep an eye out on this. If I notice there's a new edition out, I'll let the instructor know, but I can't always keep track of it all. So if you're not sure, you can always email me and I can see what I can do for you. So we talked a little bit about formats earlier, but I really want to talk about it in a bit more depth. So OER are typically available in a variety of formats. If they're older, they might be in one format, but we really prioritize giving options to students. So we want to make sure they're accessible. Obviously, that's ideal. EPUB 3.0 or HTML are good formats for that. Reflowable for a variety of devices. So if a student has an iPad, a laptop, a phone, it all looks not the same, but it's very easy to read. So what I mean by this is a PDF isn't reflowable. It's static text, right? So you have to zoom in sometimes to read it, but then you have to move sideways to read the whole length of the sentence, right? Our reflowable text will change the text to different lines based on the size of your screen. So that's super ideal. You also want a format that's easily adaptable by others. So if you have a static format, like PDF, which is essentially an image, it's really hard for folks to change that. They're going to have to copy the text, and that doesn't preserve any of the formatting, right? It's a big deal to adapt a PDF. So when we talk about formats, PDFs are a viable option, but they're just not ideal for best practices. I say they're a viable option because sometimes that's the only thing you can do. So we talked a bit about storage earlier, but there are a few different places that you can deliver OER to students in a stable environment. For example, we have the digital reading room through the library. So this usually serves links to students, but we can also upload files. Unfortunately, at the moment, we can only support PDF files. So if you find an OER you like, we can download it as a PDF and serve it there to students. That ensures that it is stable, so all students are getting that same experience. But the downside is that we don't have reflowable text, etc., right? You could also add them as files in the course. So within Brightspace, you could have a link to download the text. You don't want to embed that content inside modules, like the actual text, but files that you could do. You could put them in Manifold. So Manifold is a great delivery platform, which I will show you a bit more about later. But those are for OER publishing support projects only under the Remix imprint. Finally, you could serve them as external links. This is actually what most people do at AU at the moment because there's not a whole lot of options. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, those could be unstable. So those servers could go down and then your students don't have access to the text and you have no recourse. Some good news on this front is that I am working towards a OER repository, a place where folks can store their OER not for archiving purposes, but rather for delivery, so that there is this dedicated space that students can access. Licensing is another factor to consider when delivering OER. Licenses, they can be complex and confusing. Usually that Creative Commons license is pretty straightforward, but there's always those edge cases. When you're delivering your research to students, don't hesitate to reach out to ask. You need to double check that your use complies with the right license terms. I get a lot of questions about non-commercial, for example. Folks will ask, is it okay to use a non-commercially licensed work in a course, right? Because students are paying for the course. Doesn't that mean that we're making money off the resource? In that case, it's not quite a commercial use because students aren't paying for that resource. They're paying for the instructional benefits provided by the instructor, tutors, and content in the LMS. So it doesn't count as commercial use. But that's just one example of a licensing complexity that it's kind of good to reach out and double check those things. If you've selected an OER and you are delivering it to students, it's important to attribute it correctly. In the OER world, we use this this attribution called tassel. So try and think of grad caps with that tassel on it. We've got the title, author, source, and license in that order. I've used the example there of Rethink Right, Writing in University by Pam Chamberlain and Dean Dubelbauer. This is a OER that we published 2 years ago now. It was one of our first titles through the OER Publishing Support Program, and you can view it over on the AU Press website. To cite this, we have the title there, Rethink Right, Writing in University. You'll notice that the title is hyperlinked, so this ensures that anyone looking at the citation can click on that and visit the original work. Then, of course, we have the authors. We have the source, which is AU Press, and then we have the license. If you remember, we can kind of decipher this license here. So CC means Creative Commons, BY means you need to attribute it or buy. NC means not commercial, so you can't take this work and sell it. Excuse me. And SA means share alike, so you can't take the work and make it no derivative. For example, you can't add some more restrictions to it. And that is also hyperlinked. That's hyperlinked to the actual license terms on the Creative Commons website. So folks who you don't have to memorize what it all means. You can actually click on it and see what they specify. I also wanted to share a few examples of adopted OER at AU. So these are OER that people have found and not modified. So they've just liked what they found. They don't want to make any changes, and they serve them to students. Almost all of them are served as links to external websites. So the danger of that, of course, is that they're unstable, but it's kind of what they had to do in the past. And this is just a small selection, by the way. AU has many OER in use. Before we talk about the OER Publishing Support Program, I wanted to share a few library resources as well. So if you're brand new to OER, check out the OER guide. It's our LibGuide on all things OER. You'll find information about everything we've covered today, lots of the basics of OER, and links everywhere around. We include a copyright and licensing mini course. So if you want to test your skills there, it's a great way to learn. We also offer an open community of practice. This is a quarterly meeting where we just have a very laid back, relaxed discussion of everything open. So open data, open pedagogy, open access, you name it. And we just kind of chat and have a focused discussion on one particular topic. The next session is on March 12th. So that's next week at noon on Wednesday. And we are doing a little feature on open futures. Just as a spoiler, we will be talking about results of the OER survey that went out recently. Really the place to dip your feet into OER here. AU is the OER Community Corner. You go over on Engage there, you'll find it. It's really a hub. So you'll find links to all the resources I mentioned. You'll find news for events happening. You'll find articles that people have found interesting, features of OER practitioners, that type of thing. It's a great place to get involved. Speaking of the faculty survey, it is still open. So if you are a faculty member at AU, I would really appreciate it if you could fill in this survey. It helps inform the library services that we provide and how we might improve those. It also assesses your kind of awareness of what we are and how we can improve that. All right, well, I can finally talk about the OER Publishing Support Program. So this is an initiative that provides comprehensive support for the development of accessible, consistent, and high-quality openly licensed resources for AU courses. As it is an initiative through AU Press, they really have expertise with textual projects. So they provide supports on project management, copy editing, typesetting, design, file conversion, or creation, and even DOI registration, which is super awesome. In that process, successful applicants will be benefited from clear and consistent communication. There'll be collaboration with course production staff even to make sure those revision deadlines are set. It's a really neat program that I encourage you to check out. To support you through that program, there's of course myself, McKinley Darlington, the interim director of AU Press, and our latest collaborator, Kyle Flemmer, and he is the OER project coordinator. So successful applicants will be guided through the whole publication process by himself, which is super awesome. What we're looking for in terms of application is a couple of different things. So first, we're looking for OER ready authors. We're looking for people who are really highly confident in their selected OER. And again, if you're not, if you haven't found that right OER, please don't hesitate to contact me. I do OER searches for people all the time. And I kind of know the ins and outs of the different search engines and where to look and all that. So happy to help. We're also, we like people who have a really clear vision of that final output. People who know what they want their OER to look like. We also prioritize or favor projects that are focused on content over technology. Not to say that we don't support interesting technology use cases and that sort of thing. But the primary focus is on getting that base down first. So we use this metaphor of the cake, right? You want to have this really good cake base down before you have icing and sprinkles, that sort of thing. In terms of content, there is definitely more expertise with text-based content. Obviously, AU Press has that experience, they have the skills, but we have fielded a few applications from folks looking to make videos, so that's obviously still a possibility. Ideally, we're looking for openly licensed material that are primed for adoption, adaptation, or remixing. So if you're writing OER on your own, there's going to be a lot more work. Not to say that it was impossible, but think of it as the difference between writing your own novel as opposed to taking someone else's novel and making it the way you like it, right? So there's a lot less work for the press if there's some considerations made into formatting already. We also enjoy comprehensive, accurate, and organized information that's not going to be obsolete in a short period of time. So older editions of books, content on things that may change very quickly. That's less amenable to publication. So what happens when we are actually published through this program? Well, they head over to the Remix imprint. So this is where the content is actually delivered to students. And that's through the Manifold platform. So this, like I mentioned before, provides options for students to reflow text so they can even resize their screen and the text will change to that. They can read their content online. They can download in multiple formats. They can download things for their e-readers too, which is great. The Manifold platform also allows students to annotate the text. They can add their own comments. They can highlight sections that they like, and you can generate citations. So it's a little bit like having a print book, which is great. So far, we've published 3 different titles. We have Critical Thinking, Logic, and Argument. It's a philosophy textbook. Introduction to Computer Programming with Python. And Read Think Write, which I mentioned before, is an English textbook. If you are curious about this program, I highly encourage you to check out the Remix imprint over at AU Press and poke around, see what you like, and you'll see if that's something that might interest you. The other benefit to publishing through this program is that your work will have global impact. So I take those finished books and I distribute them to various OER repositories around the world. This allows your OER to be translated to other languages, localized to other contexts, and customized to meet diverse cultural and educational needs. So your work will go on to live a life beyond your own purposes, which is fulfilling that promise of OER. If you're interested, the application period does open every January. The first step is to select your OER. I can help you with that. And the second step would be to submit an application form. So if you're confident in your research choices, you can either request an application from OER at athabascau.ca, or you can just contact me because it goes to the same person. And I'll be happy to help you through the application process or submit an application on your behalf. Usually we'll have a sort of reference interview to go through some possibilities there. And the application window does open every January. However, this year we've decided to extend that a little farther. So there's still room. If you have a really great project, there's still room to apply. And with about 15 minutes to go, looks like we're just on time. I wanted to open up questions. So if anybody had anything to do with this presentation or any other questions, you're welcome to drop it in the chat or unmute yourself. happy to answer them. Also, it's possible that I have not allowed you to unmute yourself, which would be unfortunate. Maybe you can raise your hand. See if I can figure this out. And select multiple people. I'd have to allow microphone for each one of you. Let's see if that works. And if folks don't have any questions, that's totally fine. I realize this is a lot of information at once, so maybe it'd be good to go check out that OER Community Corner and learn at your own pace. Like I mentioned, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to view it and pause it at any time. I'll upload that later today. Great. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So I was wondering about how Tassel, in terms of OER attribution, kind of works with a dominant referencing style being used in a course. So for example, in Faculty of Science and Technology, we typically use APA for referencing
Right.
sources. So would it be like we're using APA for everything else, and then there's an OER, so we use this format instead, or can they be integrated?
That's a really good question, right? I would guess that if you are requiring all your students to cite in APA, they would have to do an APA citation for an OER. If you are the place to use the tassel citation is when you are listing, say, resources available in your class. Does that help? So
That does help, but I'm also
yeah,
wondering, like when we are making, like when the editors are making the list
right.
of resources, um, if there are other resources that are not OERs, those would be an APA.
Yes. It's a good question. I think you'd have to use the tassel.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that would be my
Okay.
guess.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Oh, we got chat here. What does it say? In terms of French OERs, are they mainly from North America or are there some from France, for example? They are really mainly from North America, from what I've seen, but I'm sure there's a few from France available as well. This is definitely ongoing work. There are teams of people in Quebec who are taking English language OER and translating them over. So there's some equity there. But otherwise, people are looking into things like AI to translate, which is a whole another catfish. But if you're ever looking for French language OER in particular for whatever subject, I'm happy to do some searches for you. You're most welcome. All right. Just a few more seconds for any more questions. And I will give you back the rest of your hour, 10 minutes more to your day. Thanks so much for attending. If you want to contact me, you can contact me at Dan or dcocroft@athabascau.ca. You can also email me at OER@athabascau.ca. And if you want to contact the OPSP team, you can use the email oerpublishing@thebasketu.ca. Again, I encourage you to check out the OER Community Corner over on Engage, and if you want the AU Press imprint remix. Thank you so much for attending, and have a great day. Take care. Bye.